Hello and welcome to episode 242 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On the show today, I'll be joined by Main Street Electrical Arcade, also known as Eric. During a recent visit to the West Coast, Eric visited the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco, California. Not only are we going to talk about his visit and what he enjoyed, but we will also try to figure out if it's worth visiting for any of you who are listening. Before we get started, there are a few things I wanted to mention on the podcast. If you're listening on the day this is going live, it is my co-host Sarah Says' birthday. Over the past 4.5 years of this show, Sarah has become one of my closest friends, and I'm so stoked that I believe I will get to see her in the next few days. It is just a prime example of the positives that can happen from social media, podcasts, and internet culture. There are a lot of negatives, but it can be a way to meet people who share your interests and values. Happy birthday, Sarah. You are the best. Without directly addressing any particular events that happened in the world in the past few weeks, it is getting more and more vitriolic for many groups of people on the internet. And that online toxicity is bleeding into the real world as well. I just want to reiterate our goal and promise to always be an inclusive place where everyone can feel welcomed. If you are transgender, you are welcome here. If you are a woman, person of color, or disabled, you are welcome here. It isn't that we don't care about your race, gender, sexuality, nationality, religion, or disability status. We feel that we are a stronger community when we have people of all different races, genders, sexualities, nationalities, religions, and abilities. While the rest of the internet devolves into hate, we are going to remain a place where people can feel comfortable. Please take 30 seconds to make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. There's a lot you're going to want to see in video form. Recently, I had trips to Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cooperstown. Those trips were for baseball purposes, but I accomplished so much more in those locations than just baseball-related things. You're going to want to make sure that you're checking out these videos. Please drop likes and comments on all the videos you enjoy. This upcoming week, I'm going to be back at Walt Disney World to make use of my annual pass one more time before it expires. I have been an annual pass holder at WDW since April of 2019, and that pass expiring later this month will really signify this new chapter of my life back in the Northeast. Right now, let's welcome Main Street Electrical Arcade back to the show. Thanks for being here, Eric.
Glad to be back. It's been a little over a year, I believe. Like, we did our episode, I want to say last May or June, somewhere around there.
It was something like that, yeah. So, You recently were in San Francisco or the San Francisco area and got the chance to visit the Walt Disney Family Museum. And I think this is a Disney-related tourist destination that not a lot of our listeners have had the chance to visit. So I kind of wanted to get an overview about it. So first of all, what were your impressions of the Walt Disney Family Museum?
Well, it's a neat place. It's not huge, but it goes through Walt's life, basically from childhood till his untimely passing. Goes through a few of the early movies, the start of Disneyland, all that kind of stuff. And usually they have some kind of special exhibit going on. This time they did have a Mary Blair exhibit, which my wife and I really like because she's a big fan of her art and her creations and stuff. And there's a couple of different floors to it. There's a gift shop that has some unique things you wouldn't find at any of the parks because they're unique to the museum. Like I picked up an Oswald pin that you can't find anywhere else. My wife got a couple, and they have like old school stuffed animals there that you don't really see in the parks. One thing that people may not know, if they even know about the museum, is it's not owned by the Disney Corporation. It's owned by the Disney family. Like they're in cooperation, but it's wholly owned by the Disney family. So they only have Disney would only have so much say over it, over what's in there and what's not, more or less.
So first of all, while you were there, you got to see this special exhibit about Mary Blair. We've talked about Mary Blair a number of times on the show. Obviously, the iconic designs of It's a Small World, of the big mural in the contemporary resort. So, why don't you describe a little bit that Mary Blair exhibit, and was there anything that you learned about her, or what was that like?
It has a lot of her artwork and yeah, and talks about her contributions to the park and other things like that. I mean, I think I rather, I mean, I know who Blair is, being a Disney fan, but I didn't know a whole lot about her anyway. So it was all, learning about stuff like her early life and her husband and things like that, and how closely she worked with Walt, all that kind of stuff was there.
Yeah, such a pioneering woman in the theme park industry because, I mean, she was really one of the first women to have such a big role in, well, first the animation and then when it moved over to the theme parks. So, what are some of the other exhibits like here? Are you learning a lot about Walt and his early life, like in Marceline? Are you learning a lot about the, trip to California? Or is it everything? I think a lot of people will relate to One Man's Dream in Disney's Hollywood Studios and say, oh, that's kind of like a little museum about Walt's life. But how would you compare this on a bigger scale than that attraction?
It's pretty comprehensive because there's multiple floors, and it's all focused on Walt. So it goes into, it does talk about his early childhood, and it does have a lot of audio from Walt talking about his childhood and various phases of his life. And it does talk about things like, the World War II stuff he did, and the right and the strike period, which I'm kind of surprised, because that stuff's kind of controversial. I'm surprised they had that stuff in there. But it's all there. It's warts and all. It's pretty much all there for his whole life. One thing my wife specifically noticed, I don't know if you've heard this, but Disney doesn't like to focus on the fact that Walt was a big smoker, and that's what kind of did him in early, mostly. There are no photos of cigarettes in his hand, even when it's clearly he was holding a cigarette. Like, you could tell it was edited out in some photos. There's no mention of the fact that he smoked at all in any of the exhibits or any of the descriptions. So it's like they kind of like to pretend that no, he did not smoke, even though it's pretty well established. Like, that's kind of what led to an early demise.
That's interesting because they would talk about his strike breaking and they would talk about some of the other not so flattering parts of his life, but that's the one that they still sort of
Yeah.
shy away from it. That's kind of interesting. I'm assuming that you would say it's because the family runs the museum that you get the warts and all version of Walt, because I think they're a little more willing to show him as a real human being because they were related to
Yeah.
him, whereas the company still needs to use him. I mean, he's an animatronic now at Disneyland. Like, he's almost like a character in his own right when it comes to the Walt Disney Company. So do you think that because this is run by the family, you actually get a better view of Walt as a real person?
Yeah, I think, and this probably because they have to cooperate with Disney on some level. It's probably sort of a middle ground thing where some things are left in, some things, like, I know that's a Walt Disney thing, corporation thing too, is they don't show him smoking, um, are taken out. So it's more than you would see as like Disney's very whitewashed version of him, but probably not the full picture. You know.
So a lot of us are really into the Disney company, the theme parks, the movies, and we've studied this stuff a lot. would you say that somebody who knows Disney like we all know it, who consumes it like we all consume it, are you going to learn anything new here? Or even if you're not going to learn anything new, do you still think it's a valuable experience for somebody who pays as much attention to the company as we do on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think there are things to learn. Probably somebody who's a deep expert in Walt Disney specifically probably wouldn't see a lot of stuff they didn't already know, but it's fun to go see the exhibits, obviously, hear Walt talk. The most incredible part of it was there was this like miniature version of Disneyland that isn't like an exact representation, but I posted photos on social media of this that like it's just a really good like what it is and what it will be and what it and the various areas. It's a really impressive thing they've got there for they're just showing like a miniature version of Disneyland basically.
And if you don't mind me asking, how much was it to visit this museum?
I know they have a membership. Didn't look into how much that was. It was I know for two adults it was $25 per person, which for how much time we spent there, not too bad. And then things I know there's museums you can go to like they're either free or they're like $10 or whatever. But San Francisco things tend to be very, very expensive. So $25, that area, pretty reasonable, all things considered.
Awesome. And you would say that you got your money's worth? You spent enough time? Like, how much time did you spend?
I'd say about 2 hours. They do have a cafe there that we didn't really like. It closes earlier than the actual museum that we didn't get to check out, but it's just like little snacks and stuff there, so nothing. And not really. You know how Disney has like all their like at least if it's not a unique snack, it's got unique branding or packaging on it. They didn't really seem to have that there, which I thought was a little odd, but whatever. It's a little cafe. It doesn't really. It's in a place called the Presidio, which is a former like army base turned into a tourist attraction. And there's lots of other restaurants and attractions around that area, so you could definitely go do something else or eat somewhere else, like within walking distance, very easily.
And Walt grew up in the Chicago area, Marceline. He was in the Kansas City area, and then he moved out to the Los Angeles area. I'm wondering why, if they even mentioned it, is the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco.
Uh, the best I can tell is it's opportunity and coincidence because I looked it up. It did say they were considering other places among San Francisco, and it's just like this place happened to have buildings for lease. They thought it was a good location. They'll do it. Because yeah, you would think, oh, we'll put it in either in one of the parks or at least near one of the parks or where he grew up. And it's like it's a little out. It's not San Francisco's. I mean, without stopping, it's at least an 8-hour drive to Anaheim, for example. So it's not a close trip. Like you could, like if you got up real early, and actually, my sister who lives in the Bay Area said she thought about doing a day trip to Disney, but I'm like, we'd have to get up so early to get out to get our money's worth out of a day trip, where we'd have to get up, drive down there, drive back. It's just like not it's like California is a gigantic state, so it's like all the major cities are pretty far apart.
Well, yeah, it would be like, oh, while we're in Boston, let's try to take a tour of the U.S. Capitol and the Lincoln Memorial. Like they're that far apart.
Yeah, I think it's when people from other countries that have like places much closer together and a lot of easier ways to get to places come here, and they're like, oh, we can just go, from California to Vegas, no problem. Which a lot of people do, but it's like, no, it's several hours to get there. It's not just a like quick trip. It's
So, what were some of your favorite exhibits that you saw that were more permanent exhibits?
they had a lot of stuff that was like, how he came up with how he got into animation and how his career started with that kind of stuff, and his first company, which had not been going well, and then he broke into animation, and that kind of like did very well for him. Um, there was a lot of stuff on like how Snow White came about, how Sleeping Beauty came about, how you know, also like times when the company wasn't doing so well with their releases. Not at least through the time he was alive. Um, and that's it ends on a little bittersweet note because the last thing is he passed and like how the world reacted to that. But it's a lot of like nice. You see a lot of the articles and artwork from the company, from other people, from other artists. It's like it's clear like when he left, it was a really tremendous loss, like worldwide, and it really had an impact.
Did they talk at all about how he was working on Walt Disney World when he passed and how Roy sort of took on that mantle? Or did they basically just end it right at his death?
There's a little bit about like yes, the basically the legacy continues. And I didn't, I kind of had this stuff in my head, but I did not know Roy died only like 5 years after Walt passed, like just basically long enough to finish Disney World opening, and he passed not long after that. Like I knew like Roy didn't last a whole lot longer after, but I didn't know it was only about a 5 year difference. That's something I learned at the museum that I wasn't aware of.
Oh, earlier this year when we lost Ozzy Osbourne, and he just played like a week or two before
I
he
think it was like at
passed.
most 3 weeks. Yeah,
He played this huge concert that was 9 hours long, and he finished, playing the hits, and then, within a couple days, really, he had passed away. It kind of felt like, he had given it his all, and he got a couple weeks to look back on it, and then he passed. And it's almost like that was Roy with Walt Disney World, because Roy got Walt Disney World open. Magic Kingdom opened on October 1st, 1971, and he passed in December. So he just barely got that thing off the
yeah.
ground. And it felt like he had that goal. And he's like, I'm going to get this done for my brother. I'm going to get this thing off the ground, and then once I do that, I'm checking out because I'm good. So, as somebody who does love the parks, do you think this is something that other people should make the effort to go see, or would you only suggest if you're going to be in San Francisco anyway?
I think it's very much yeah, I don't know if you need to like make a pilgrimage or anything like that. It's good. I don't think I'm going to go back unless there's a specific exhibit I really want to see. Because once you've seen it, unless they really update it, you've seen what there is to see. There's not a whole lot else to go on there. So I would say if you're in the area, absolutely worth checking out. If you happen to go to San Francisco, which has nice area to visit, has a lot of fun touristy things to do. This would be one of them. If you're any kind of Disney fan, it's interesting to check out and fun. But I don't know that you would need to make, like I said, make a pilgrimage. You can get your Walt fix at any other park that's going to have, they'll have something that you can just like, oh, this is my hit of Walt, so to speak.
So, this museum was almost the brainchild of Diane Disney Miller, who not only was Walt Disney's daughter, but she was also married to the former head of the Walt Disney Company, Ron Miller, who was there before Michael Eisner took over. That was sort of the big contentious. Ron Miller was the last time that the Walt Disney Company was run by somebody in the
Somebody directly
Disney
connected to the
family.
family. Yeah.
And do you think that this does a really good job of connecting Walt back to the family? Because, like we said, he's almost turned into a character by the company. He is very much, there was Saving Mr. Banks, where Tom Hanks played him, and now we have an animatronic in Disneyland, and we have the statue in Epcot where you can sit next to him and have a picture taken. So is it nice that we're finally preserving like the real person a little bit more, and we're remembering that this is a human being who created these things that we loved? And as much as we don't want to talk about the strike breaking, and we don't want to talk about some of these other things that might be less flattering towards him, I think they all go into the story to how we got Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the international parks. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. Like I said, I think it's a little bit of a compromise. Like there definitely is a little bit of what do I want to say? There's definitely a little bit of like whitewashing and making him seem. I mean, he is a larger than life person, and that sort of plays into it. And because of that, I think it's portrayed a little bit softer than somebody doing like every presenting the entire side of that. But I think it strikes a good balance. Like it shows that yes, he was someone who came from somewhere, who is a real person, had flaws like everybody else, that sort of thing.
And I imagine that even though the family is going to be a little more willing to show those things, he's still a family member, and you're going to want to
Right.
be fair to him there as well. Does the museum get into a lot of his love of trains? I know that
Yes.
one of my favorite things to do in Walt Disney World is the Carolwood Pacific Room over on the DVC side of Disney's Wilderness Lodge. And I was just thinking if there was ever a place where Disney could really show a lot of those, trains that he had, some of his ideas, some of his concepts for why he wanted so many trains in the parks. And you're saying that they do address that in this museum. So how do they do that?
Yeah, there is a whole exhibit. It's I don't think most of it's original, but it's a lot of replicas of like childhood trains and designs and sketches and all that kind of stuff. There's like a whole section on how much he loved trains.
So I mentioned a little bit ago Ozzy Osbourne passing away, and this year we have lost a number of big name celebrities, which I think has started to get people our age who maybe have been lucky and they've been able to keep large portions of their childhood that at least were intact when they were born. They were able to keep them intact, and now we're starting to see that that's not going to last forever. We lost Theo Huxtable. We lost, some of the people who like the WWE. They lost Hulk Hogan. And Walt was somebody that, like you said, he passed early. We lost him before most of us were around. So, do you think that having places like this to remind people about the inspiration, because Walt at his best was inspiring, and he was definitely a capitalist and he wanted to make money, and he was definitely into making money, but he was not above spending money to make money. And he was about putting a quality product out there and having people gravitate towards that product. As you look at the parks now, and we look at some of the nickel and diming with individual lightning lanes, and with even, lightning lane in general, and Genie Plus, and everything that we've called all of these things, you see aspects like Rivers of America going away in Magic Kingdom, and you just see some of these things that were staples of Walt's version of a theme park. And they're not museums. He said that. The parks aren't museums. This museum is a museum. But do you think being reminded of his legacy and being reminded that he did have this vision for something is worthy of remembering, is worthy of celebrating, because I do feel like even if you like a lot of the changes which are being made in the parks, which I think a lot of us are happy about some of them, they do all feel very corporate and very methodical. And just celebrating Walt's, I don't want to say impulsive nature, but his ability to stretch and his ability to say, no, we're going to spend more money on this. Is that something that is worthy of celebrating at this point in the history of the theme parks?
I think so. And to your point of it not being a museum, he also said, I believe he famously said, Disneyland is never finished. He probably would have said that about not Disney World, you know, nothing, whether or not he would have made these decisions, people always say, what would Walt do? But it's hard to say, you know, I mean, there's no way he'd be alive now, regardless. But what he would have done if he lived another 40 years or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that when you talk about what would Walt do, his original plan for Epcot wouldn't have worked. It just wouldn't have worked. So we sometimes romanticize what would Walt do when what Walt would have done wouldn't have been successful.
Well, a lot of people have complained a lot about, IP placement in the parks when that's always been a thing. I mean, what is Sleeping Beauty Castle? That's success, it's a Cinderella. I mean, it's the parks have always been filled with IP, maybe a couple of original things, but that's always been a thing, and it's just continues to be a thing. It's also that's what's going to draw people for the most part. You can't just put random ride with no attachment to it. Maybe you get a few people in who are like the hardcore parks fans, but you know, people who especially people who spend a lot of money to come either across the country or from other countries to come here, they'll need more than just, a name that nobody recognizes, for example.
So, Eric, you are also a very big video game fan. Actually, the last time we had you on the show, it was talking about some of the Disney video games. While you were in San Francisco, you got to visit one of the two Nintendo stores in the United States of America. Why don't you talk about that as a tourist destination as well?
Okay, this is very much not a museum. They actually have one in, I believe, Kyoto that is like a museum. But yeah, there's only two in the U.S.
Did I
One
say
in New York,
museum?
one. Well, no, I'm just stressing that this is not a museum. Because I think some people come to that place thinking like it's like a museum and there'll be a lot of history there. No, it's a store. They got stuff to sell you. You're not going to spend a couple hours in there, probably. There's a lot of cool merch. I know there's like obviously a Universal Nintendo store. There's and you don't see the same merch that you do in the Universal Nintendo store that you do in the like Nintendo store. Uh, it's they've got games, they've got stuff things, they've got amiibos, which are like these little characters that can connect to certain games and give you in-game benefits, but they're also like cool little statues that anybody who plays like Nintendo will know what they are. um, but yeah, it's a great little place to spend, I don't know, 30 minutes and probably spend too much money. um, so I've heard, I haven't been there myself. I've heard that the New York store that has been around longer, because the Nintendo store in San Francisco has only been open a few months, has not been great the last few years. Like they haven't refreshed it enough. They haven't. Uh, the stock is of what's there is kind of low. It hasn't been that good lately. So hopefully with this new one, they'll keep that up and maybe you'll let them invigorate the New York one as well. But I do see a reason. Like this is a place I would, as long as there's new things, I would probably come back every single time I visit. Which, if I haven't mentioned already, my family lives in the Bay Area, so I try and come back at least every couple of years. So it definitely would be something I would hit up every couple of years when I go.
And then, with the exception of the Walt Disney Museum and the Nintendo store, as somebody who does go back to the Bay Area, this is a travel podcast. We don't just talk theme parks. what are a couple of your other favorite things to do in the Bay Area as a tourist?
Well, since I did live there for a while and I mostly go back to hang out with my family, it's only usually like one or two touristy things I go back for. But Pier 39 is always a fun place. There's a lot of little shops there. We actually went to a since we were there and we were going to be back for a while. There was a Christmas shop we went into there and bought a couple ornaments. We ate a bubblegum shrimp, which is also at Universal, at least as last I checked it was. There's a lot of like unique experiences there. Obviously Golden Gate Bridge, you can go there, but as somebody who's lived there, I've never been to, like I've crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, but I've never like gone on it as like a tourist person. Um, yeah, there's a ton of fun stuff to check out. No shortage of things to do. Um, people might one unique thing I did that's not in a lot of places is I rode in a driverless car called a Waymo, where you just get in, it drives you to your destination, and that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I don't even know if I want to know about that one. That would scare the dickens out of me.
I
Tell
sent
you.
photos to a lot of my coworkers. They're like, "How are you even comfortable with that?" I'm like, "That's fine. It works. It's there's enough real bad drivers out there. I don't know how this is worse."
All right. So Eric, also known as Main Street Electrical Arcade, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the podcast.
Anytime. Love to come on again soon.
This has been episode 242 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We will be back with another brand new episode of the show next Thursday. And coming up in October, I will definitely be doing a recap on my return to Walt Disney World theme parks. That will include my opinions on some of the new attractions on property, like the Villain Show in Disney's Hollywood Studios and the Nighttime Parade at Magic Kingdom. Until then, have a great week.